Yeah, go for it. All right.
And we're live in three, two, and welcome everybody to another episode of the Planet Mullins podcast. My guest today is an unbelievable DJ and quite a performance art specialist now with a team of guys working with him. And we've been friends for a long time. He's a Hollywood icon that's DJ'd at tons of celebrities' houses and all the big clubs. Please say hello to my good buddy, DJ Crash.
Hey there. Well, I don't hear the applause track going in the background.
No, it's we have to overdub that.
I'm like, you've got this huge amount of speakers behind you, and I'm like, okay, well, hit the track.
Yeah, hit the button. What's up with the buttons? Well, I was just in prep for the show today. I was looking at your bio and your website, which of course is beautifully done. And since you and I last talked a few years ago, you have just kind of exploded with all these things that you're doing. Why don't you talk a little bit about the team, Crash, and some of these things you're up to?
Well, obviously, COVID it changes a little bit in that regard.
Yeah.
So this part of the story that that we're going to talk about is really the future of what's going to happen. But I've been working on a project lately, at least for the last couple of years, that's hopefully going to be streaming or on film, etc. So it's not just music side of stuff that I'm dealing with. I'm also dealing with like a TV or streaming aspect of business. So it's all entertainment, just like you. You know.
It's really
you might play piano, but you do a lot more. You're in how many porns were you in? Are you ready to hit stop on the record button?
No, I think you got me confused with Screech for a minute.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
that's hilarious.
Yeah,
no, we've known each other long enough. I think we're allowed to be kind of cruel with each other in a sense sometimes.
Absolutely. Well, we have plenty of creative license and insane things that we share to go around. And for those of us that are not familiar with Crash but regularly watch my show, the way that we met is we met at a place called Barfly on Sunset, and Crash was early on in his young crashing career at that point, and I was playing in a band called the China Club All Stars with some really heavy dudes like Steve Ferroni from Tom Petty and Skunk Baxter from Steely Dan on guitar. And Ivan Neville would come in and reach over me and play the B3 over my Rhodes and stuff. And we had just some really amazing nights.
We could go through a list. Literally, we could go through the list. I mean, I can remember, Shaka Khan, and I think Bowie came up there once. I heard Prince. I don't even remember seeing Prince, but I guess Prince went up on stage once or twice,
Yeah, I think by the time you'd done it for a year, you were already so Hollywoodized that you're like, oh yeah, some guy in purple's down there. Would somebody bring me a drink?
Yeah, I honestly, I would probably sit in the corner because my DJ booth would be up above. Right. I would actually be in the middle of the room above everything. So I could see the entire place from a perch, basically.
Right. I remember some of those pictures that you shot up there of like the insanity going on down below were really epic photos, and so many celebrities came through. I remember Bruce Willis being there, and I ended up joining.
He went on stage. Bruce Willis would go up there and play the harmonica. I remember that too. Yep, go ahead. Yep. Yeah. Keep going through the list.
I think one of the funniest things that ever happened at Barfly was Kiefer Sutherland came in and he was just blasted. He was so far gone, and he really wanted to play with a band. And AK, who was our band leader, was like, "No, man, it's okay. You're fine. Just have a seat over there." And Kiefer was not having it, and I don't remember this. Keep going. He finally jumped up on stage and he grabbed somebody's guitar and put it on, and he said, "Okay, Guns N' Roses, knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door, go." Gee, so we started playing this tune, And, you know, it's only like a 16 bar tune. That's all it is. And, you know, 9 minutes later, Tim Scott and I, he's the bass player, we're looking at each other going, okay, man, he wants to take bets on how many more times we're going to have to play this frickin' vamp because we couldn't get Kiefer off the stage. And eventually they finally pulled him.
He probably kept repeating knocking on heaven's door, right? Just
Yeah,
that's it. That's all he did was repeat that for like probably 3 minutes.
Yeah, well, it was longer than that. I mean, you know, we could have all gone on break and come back and he still would have been up there. It was
God, you know what this conversation we're about to have, you're probably gonna remind me of stuff I don't even remember. Seriously.
Well, you know, it was a while back. I mean, we were kind of at the heyday of that in the early 2000s with the China Club, and then we had what was so unique about it, everybody, is that Crash would do a set, and he was upstairs, and I could look from where the B3 organ and the Fender Rhodes was, and I could see him up there. And you could only
you were always stage left, right? I mean, if you were sitting to the right. You know, if you were sitting in the audience, you could see you on the right side. I remember that. AK would be on the left.
Right. He was on the left on the back with that huge percussion rig that he couldn't play.
It was always, you know, AK was there every week. So, I mean, you would be there probably every other week or so. Maybe you were there almost every week, right? I mean, that's how we became almost friends.
Yeah, after I kind of, you know, they kind of got used to having a jazz guy in their rock and roll world, and it started to be cool. But it was a little touch and go at the beginning because, you know, I wasn't really part of that group, and I was subbing for Teddy Andriotis, who was the keyboard player for Guns N' Roses, and that's how I kind of got my foot in the door. And man, it's too bad he wasn't there the night that Kiefer Sutherland was.
That would have been hilarious.
Was doing that. But how it worked, folks, is that Crash would do a set, and then we'd have a live band set.
And we would play off of each other, too, in a sense. You know, I would try to create a certain energy. I mean, you guys obviously created the energy, and then I would have to try to contain it or keep it going for whatever, 30 minutes. That 30-minute window that you guys took your break, and then you'd come back on stage and I would be playing something funky, and then you guys would just start, you know, playing the drums and put keys into it, and then sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes you guys would be, you know, you would just play into that song.
Right. Well, you know, the song selection is something I really kind of want to do a bit of a deep dive on with you today because you know, I've seen you in that situation and some other situations, and you seem, especially from the comments on your website, like everybody is so happy with the flow and with the direction and with the energy. And I know that you do a lot of celebrity gigs. You did the Playboy Mansion for years. You worked with Jennifer Lopez, Mariah Carey, George Clooney, Matt Damon, Howard Stern. What was it like working with Howard Stern? I wish I could have been at that party.
Well, actually, Howard Stern used to come to Barfly quite a bit. So anytime he was in town, Howard Stern would actually sit not below where I was perched, but he would be on the other side of the wall. There were these three, you'd walk into Barfly. It was basically a big rectangle, a bar smack in the center. It was almost like a figure eight type of a bar.
Huge place too. It seated a lot of people.
It did, but it wasn't huge. Like, you know, when we think of super clubs now, we're thinking 2,000, 3,000 people. Then it was probably, I mean, maybe you could stuff about 400 or 500 people in there. And we're talking really stuff it into that place.
Well, I think 400 was probably fire marshal, and 500 is probably what it typically was on a Wednesday night, because I remember not being able to even walk near the bathroom in that place. It was so crowded.
Yeah, on special nights, absolutely. I mean, and then lines down the street, but those days have changed. I mean, you're either in Vegas to see that kind of energy, or it's special events to see that type of energy. It's very rare that you would have a weekly event, a weekly promotion, a weekly club that would just have lines of people going around blocks to wait to go inside, you know. And that kind of died off in the mid 2000s, maybe, or maybe even, you know, I don't know. We're talking 10 years ago or so. It just kind of died off a bit.
Well, it did, and I think our run, the China Club run, died off probably around 2004 because there was so many drugs being done, and there was so much drama going on. There's all kinds of crazy befuddled.
You know the inside scoop on that. What are you talking about? Because I don't even know the inside scoop. Are you talking about at China Club during the China Club party, or just?
No, I mean it just it's a different thing, different energy when you're in a band. Like if you're in a band of 12 guys, then that's a completely different hang than being like the DJ up in the top in a booth by yourself, basically.
Right, because you have to jive off of the other people next to you in a sense. So if you're not feeling it with them, I guess you're. I mean, I have to feel it alone, and even though I'm a crowd to feed off of, right? But you have to kind of feed off of each other on stage to feed the crowd.
Well,
is that right?
Yeah, it was just so much fun to do that. And then, I, of course, have had my own band and made my own albums and always had a life out of China Club. But when all of that ended, like, what was your next move?
What did I do during that time period? So I was still at Barfly even when China Club finished. I was there for a couple more years. Then Barfly ended. And then I ended up doing for a few years promoting and DJing clubs. So as I think about it, I was at places on Sunset Boulevard, like the Standard I had done for about a year and a half, then moved into Hollywood area. There was a club called Mood. I had done that for a year or so. Privilege, which was at a corner of Laurel and Sunset. It's now called Hyde, Hyde. It's now called Hyde, but that spot, and again, a year. It wasn't like, there are very few residencies, I think, these days. Like you had a residency at Barfly for several years. It was a residency. It was a place that performed. I think you've got a spot right now. Aren't you doing something down on the coastline somewhere? Are you still doing that?
I was, but COVID killed it, and so it's been a weird couple of years because most of us live band guys have been out of work for a couple of years, and we all live on pretty thin margins, especially with the cost of living in LA and Venice Beach, where I'm currently at. So it's been really strange, but I'm hoping that's going to kind of come back after after the nuttiness dies down.
We're kind of dating, we're saying what we're currently living in right now on this podcast. Maybe 100 years from now, people will look back at this and be like, oh yeah, we read about that in history books.
Right.
The Omicron.
All those people got freaked out over the flu, but it's been pretty serious. I've had a couple of people die. And, there's a lot of my older musician friends, older than I am, are at really high risk situations. And I got a dad that's 93. And, but I don't think COVID could kill my dad because he's just too mean to die.
Well, that's where you get your personality from.
Oh, thanks.
And by the way, I love your hat too. I do. I love that. Rams are now going into the Super Bowl, so we got to love LA a bit.
What makes me feel so guilty is that I don't know what SoFi stands for. Do you?
I don't either, actually, now that you say that.
I was so bummed when they changed Staples Center, which was, the house that Kobe built. They changed it to crypto.com. And then somebody was talking about SoFi the other day, and then I thought, you know what? I don't even know. I know what lo-fi is.
Or hi-fi.
But I don't know what SoFi stands for. The Southern Office Fidelity Information people.
So what have you been doing? What have you been doing then for the past couple of years? I mean, you and I have been chatting by email or text over the past few years, and sometimes the great thing about communication is Facebook or whatever else you get to say hi to people. But what have you been doing then for the past few years?
Well, it's been an interesting time. I mean, obviously with the live band thing going away, I've been doing a lot of self-producing of records.
Yeah.
I've been producing. One of my really great new age piano students is finishing his first album that I produced basically out in the woods in Colorado. And it's kind of a unique thing because when you and I started getting into the aspects of the music business, the internet really wasn't as huge as it is now. I mean, we didn't have
True.
the Facebook and all of that other stuff, but I started the podcast show to just try and help my friends get work, basically.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
To see if there
Hey,
was a
we
way
should.
to publicize, because I woke up one day and I was back visiting my dad. It was like, winter time in Denver, which always stinks. Although I love Denver and I have great fans in Denver.
Is
But I
that
was,
where you're from? Are you
no,
Denver?
no, I'm from Ontario, California.
Okay, you're from Egypt. They call that Egypt down there. Yeah.
If you want to talk about serious drugs and meth labs, just talk
Oh,
about
that's true.
the IE.
Yeah.
But I lived in Colorado for a time, but I thought, well, I've met all of these amazing people like Andy Kravitz, who worked with Billy Joel and Elton John and the Rolling Stones, and
Hey.
Carmen Grillo at Big Surprise Music, and Jimmy Roberts on sax. I met him through the China Club, and we've done 3 albums together. So I thought, well, maybe if I just got together with everybody over the computer and just shot the breeze for a while, it might be an entertaining watch. And now this is my 42nd episode.
That's incredible. Yeah.
We're in season 3, and there's been quite a bit of work, although it's mostly remote work. I mean, now have you done remote DJ? Is that even
A
possible?
little bit. I used to do live streaming before anyone started doing it online. I was doing it actually live on Facebook and Instagram
Right. I
months
saw.
before the pandemic hit. And then everyone started jumping on it. And I'm like, all right, I'm jumping off of this. Like it became boring to me.
Right.
And now there are a few people that still do that, but I couldn't do it anymore. Like
Was it just you couldn't feel the vibe of the audience, right?
I had to feel myself, and I don't mean that in any touchy feely way, but I just couldn't. Yeah, I had to be able to feel the music I was playing, and it was just for myself at that point. I wasn't playing it for anybody else. I was just streaming live, like, oh, I love these particular techno tracks. That's
Right.
it. I'm going to play these techno tracks for me, and I'm just going to stream it. And if people like it, then that's great. If they don't, I don't care.
Right. Well, how big of a library of historical dance material do you have? Because when I was reading, I was, prepping for the show, and I was reading your website, and it said that you had donated your CD collection to USC, LA Community College, and Cal Arts. And I'm remembering when I got rid of my CDs, I had about 13,000, but I'm sure you had far more than that.
So imagine splitting my collection into thirds. So each university you get a third of it, and they were each bringing small, large cars to be able to fill their cars up. And they were in bags. They were in hard cases. So anyone who doesn't, we're going to talk. Maybe we should talk about the past of technology and the future of music. But anyway, so
Sure.
You went from vinyl to CD, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But I got to remember how many cases I had, 300 to 600 cases. I honestly don't remember. And each case held about 300, 400 CDs.
Wow.
So whatever that number is, multiply 400 by 400 cases by 400, maybe.
Unbelievable.
And then that's how much music maybe I had, if you can say 10 songs or 15 songs a CD or as an average.
Yeah.
So there were millions in that, and now I'm all on hard drives. So you can imagine, you can go through obviously Spotify, which is in the news right now, but you can go through like that Spotify collection or through the Apple Music collection. What is it, 60 million tunes? We all have access to it now, in a sense.
Right.
It's just, do you have access to some of the songs that aren't on those channels?
Well,
That's where I come in. That's where I'm a little different, maybe.
Well, I think probably so because, I've always been a fan of some of the more deep cuts and the more interesting things that you've brought to people's attention that aren't really that mainstream, that are more cutting edge. And I remember going to London. This was, I don't know, 94 and 95 on tour there. And they just had outdoor malls just filled with thousands of dance LPs and 12-inch singles and stuff. And there was such a scene going on there. But was techno actually the first thing that you got into, or was it disco, or how did you start collecting music?
That's great question. So, as a kid, I came from an interesting family, so I used music kind of as a way to get away from everything in my life. So as a child growing up, I would just seclude myself in a room, and I would read a book occasionally, but I always listen to music and loved music and recorded. Back in those days, it was, cassette tapes. You didn't take a vinyl to record something, you used a cassette to record it from the radio. So I was recording, music that I liked, and I was just playing with it, manipulating it. I didn't know what a DJ was. I had no clue what a DJ was. Probably, I would imagine most musicians like us, I can't say that I'm not a musician. I play other people's music, but a musician like you probably felt similarly in a sense. You probably use music as a tool or a crutch or something, maybe you grew up, your family pushed you into a piano or something.
No, it wasn't like that for me. For me, it was an escape from the horrible day-to-day reality of being a human being.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's the word, escape. That's the. It
was escape for me. It was total escapism. So, did you have?
And you were practicing.
Player? Did you start rewinding and playing your cassette backwards when the Beatles were playing their stuff back?
Yeah, exactly. Or the vinyl. Back in that day, I had a neighbor that loaned me his turntable, an amplifier, a few speakers, and a cassette deck. I mean, he loaned me all that when I was a kid. Probably, just imagining I was probably about 10 years old or 12 years old or something. And that's what kind of got me started in loving music, and then he would loan me also some vinyl, and he would loan me some 8 tracks or something like that.
Wow.
And so I would listen to all that music, and it was everything. It was like Beatles and Beach Boys and Bee Gees and even Alan Sherman. I would have just completely weird. Alan Sherman was do you know who Alan Sherman is?
No.
Hello Mother, Hello Father.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that guy. So, like comedy albums with singing, stuff like that. So I always loved something. There was something intrinsic or something deep about putting a cassette in or a vinyl on a turntable and just watching it spin, hypnotic. So, and I loved it. I can kind of look back in my mind and remember pictures, little frames of moments of just putting, a turntable needle down on a piece of vinyl. And
well, what was it? What was your, do you remember your actual first gig that you did? I remember mine really well because
yeah, when did you, how old were you when you got your first gig?
I was 11 years old, and
wow.
There was a neighbor girl who was my girlfriend, and her dad was a rich Lebanese businessman who just threw money at her since he was always gone. So she was taking singing, and she was taking dance, and she was taking acting, and she was taking piano. And every year they had refurbed her garage to be a little mini theater. Okay. And it had a long driveway that they had 100 folding chairs, and she would do these one-woman shows, and she was like 10, and she was incredible. So
how many people were showing up? 100 people?
Oh yeah.
Wow, that's huge if you think about it. I mean, that's huge.
Well, she wasn't charging any admission, and it was just,
of course, that's still huge.
It was a neighborhood thing, but when I was 11, she said, "Why don't you?" She used to call me Johnny Snare Drum because I was always carried a snare drum around because I started out as a drummer, and I had this little band called The Changing Times, and it was me and the freckly red-haired kid with a guitar and me on drums, and we were playing Inagata Vita by Iron Butterfly.
Yeah.
and some Doors and
That's cool.
some Steppenwolf and stuff like that. So we went over there and we would be her opening act, and we did that for a while. And somebody from the high school right across the street, Chaffey High there in Ontario, heard about us. So we got to open for one of the big rock bands at a homecoming dance, and it made it into the newspaper and everything. And I was 11.
And is that kind of what gave you the energy or the push to keep going? What was it that made you want to continue doing it?
Well,
I know I'm asking you the questions, but I'm just curious. What
I know we're just shooting the breeze, man. So I'm happy to discuss that. The thing about being a snare drummer at that time in my life was the discipline of it, and taking lessons and learning about rhythm and time and tempo. It was just fascinating to me. Like I had a great teacher, and I wasn't allowed to get on a drum set for a full year. I had to play a snare drum and learn everything there was to learn about the snare drum. So I had to learn how to count time. I had to learn how to play triplets and all the rudiments, the flams and the radamucus and the paradiddles and the 5 and 7 and 9 and 11 and 13 stroke rolls. And the discipline of that and just the sound of it. Like I would listen to John Densmore's snare drum on the Doors debut album, and I just kept trying to tune my drum to sound exactly like his did on Light My Fire when he comes in after the break. And I didn't have the right kind of drum, and I was always frustrated. I didn't realize that I didn't have the right drum, but it was a thing. And then when I was allowed to go on to drum set, my mom was a huge jazz person, so I bought a Buddy Rich album and I saw Buddy Rich play, and then I got the very first play along ever done by anyone, which was Let's Play Drums by Hal Blaine.
Okay,
It was a double.
Hal Blaine was one of the
Wrecking Crew.
Wrecking Crew, thank you. Yes, yeah.
And I actually did, towards the end of Hal's life, I did manage to speak with him on MySpace of all places, and to tell him thank you for, all that stuff.
Inspiration.
Yeah, so I got into it that way, but it was I think for people that channel all of their energy and their creativity into a certain direction, like myself and like you and like people that invented dance music, you can really make a case, for the most driven, loneliest, emotionally separated men in the world being responsible for some of the most amazing innovation that there ever has been.
I guess so. Yeah.
Because you think about it, and because you're sitting in a room by yourself with your gear. That's what we do.
Did you watch the Beatles bio or their
the docu?
The docu. Yeah.
No, I haven't. No,
do you want to watch it? You do. Okay.
I haven't seen it yet, but I'm gonna get around to that. I've just been busy with other stuff, and I loved the Beatles when I was a kid. Now, did you ever get into that whole, it was kind of a fad, and I'm sure it's kind of passé by now, or maybe it's not, a whole thing of like the DJ scratchy stuff where you're just...
it's turntablism, and I will be honest, I wish I had learned turntablism.
It's got a name. It's called turntablism.
Yeah. It's playing two turntables and scratching and doing tricks on the turntable. That's a gift. That's something I don't have. Mine is really more purist and playing the music and creating an energy through song after song after song. Bringing energy up, bringing it back down. And when you're playing in a band, I noticed that, and that really taught me a lot. It's weird because the Barfly China Club, in a sense, taught me, like, I could see when the energy was starting to go up a little bit with your band.
Right.
Like, you would try to take the next song and go up a little bit higher. And then you notice when the crowd starts to die off, you take it down a little bit lower. And, that's something that I had kind of known about years and years from DJing, but then seeing a band doing it, it was like, oh, they're doing what I do.
Right.
It's like, I never really had an opportunity. There's very few times that I had an opportunity to see other DJs creating that kind of energy. Usually they're just slamming for like their 1 hour, 2 hour sets straight through, but they're never taking people through some sort of a journey musically.
Right. The journey is the thing that's so interesting because, you know, I was teaching electronic music at a college in 2013 and 2014, and these college students would come in and they'd say, you know, what do you think of Skrillex? And I would say, oh, I don't know who that is yet. So then I would listen, and my brain is kind of a musical organizing tool. So I would hear how he was, you know, dropping everything to a halftime feel.
Okay. Yes.
You know, because if you got boom, 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 you're pounding along at like 133, and then you drop it, boom, you drop it down.
God, you're good.
And well,
you're good, man.
From playing the drums. I mean, I played to a click track my entire childhood. So when, you know, runners were running by on a track, I'd be like, oh, Dad, they're running at 182.
What other instruments do you play?
I play keyboard and the laptop instruments now.
Okay, well,
you know, I played sax for quite a while. I was a timpanist in the All-State Orchestra, which was really fun playing timpani drums. Okay. Yeah. But we're going back to your first gig. You keep.
Oh yeah, I know. We go off track sometimes doing that. So you know, it's hard to say what my first paid gigs were, but you know, back in my college days, I had met. This is the '80s, like mid-late '80s. During my college days, I had met a partner at that point, so we started a company, a DJ company, while we were still in college, and then we just started doing gigs. But while we were there, we were doing like garage parties, literally in a garage. You know, we would set up the turntables, the mixer. Back then, it was still the Techniques, which I still own. I think these are the original Techniques I had owned back in the 80s. I still have those.
Wow.
And I don't have the original mixer, but that was a Newmark mixer back in those days, or it would have been maybe even Radio Shack. So I'm aging this program myself on that, you know. and so people are going to look back again 100 years from now. I love it when we talk about something that it doesn't exist any longer. Radio Shack gone, you know.
Right.
And 100 years from now, people are going to have to, you know, if Google doesn't exist, whatever that encyclopedia online, they're going to have to search, like, what the heck is Radio Shack?
Well,
look that up, people.
All of that's going to be directly installed in everybody's brain anyway. So
that's true. So you know, it was garage parties. It was
okay.
I did maybe a wedding.
Crash. Let me interrupt. What college did you go to?
Cal State Northridge.
Oh, you went to Northridge.
Yeah, I did radio, TV, film. That was my subject. Okay. And management. It didn't do diddly squat for me. You know, it was more party. I mean, I tell people now, I go, if you have a very specific job or a trade you want to get into, and you're young and you know what it is you want to do, then just go for it.
Right.
Just do it and learn it. You know, did you have to go to college for your keyboard?
I didn't. I didn't do well in college either, Crash.
I'm not saying I mean, the first year I almost got kicked out. You know, literally almost got kicked out of college the first year because I was just failing everything. And then I'm like, okay, I got to turn this around. And then I got A's and B's for the rest of the time.
Yeah, I basically sued the school.
Oh, well, that's not fun.
It was fun for me.
What school did you go to?
University of Northern Colorado.
Okay.
So, but you know, it was just kind of a continuation of certain negative things that were going on in my life because we had moved to Colorado. I was a cripple during that time. I was in a near fatal car crash and I couldn't walk. And that's how I ended up playing the piano instead of the drums. And then when I went to college, my drum teacher, who was like the best in the whole area, he had a heart attack the day before my first lesson. So he was out. So I planned my whole life to study with this great teacher, and I never had a frickin' class with him. Now, while that was happening, the marching band had a new director who was going to make sure that the Greeley marching band was #1 in the region. So he took all of the people that weren't in marching band but were forced to take certain required courses, and he put me into the band when a trumpet player got sick. So here I am holding a trumpet in the marching band. It's about 10 degrees out and snowing in October in northern Colorado, and I can't play the trumpet. I hate marching band. I've always hated marching band. I think it's really just not the thing for me. So it was.
Do people actually love marching bands? I mean, I know you hate it, but do you have people that have ever said, "Oh, I love doing marching band"?
Yeah, it's a very good. It's kind of like joining the service. You know, I mean, it's really good discipline for people. You know.
Wow. I mean, you are not shining a good light on that.
Well, I think that you
know, love it or you hate it is what you're saying.
No, I remember telling people when I was in college, I said, you know, one day I want to be rich and famous enough as a jazz player to hire a marching band to play during my breaks.
Did you ever do it?
I'm still working on that one, Crash. I would pull that one off. So
I mean, dude, you're a famous guy. You got how many CDs? 20 out, 30 out?
I actually have 40.
40. See,
I just celebrated 40. Yeah, I just celebrated the 40th one this past fall. So
I shouldn't say CDs. It should just be music or albums. I don't even know what.
Yeah, music or albums. So anyway, back to your college thing. So you're in Northridge. You're playing garage parties, and nobody ever got high at those parties or drank too much, did they?
No, they always got drunk and wasted, and I mean, people danced. It's interesting, you know. But it didn't matter actually during those parties. You're just playing music. You're playing Beastie Boys. We're playing. We were playing Planet Patrol. We were playing. God, I'm trying to think of what it was back in the 80s. Dr. Dre. This is before NWA.
Oh wow!
You know, this is, you know, it's kind of crazy. So hopefully Dre is watching this, but you know, like that kind of electro that Dre and some of the other guys were doing back in the 80s really set the groundwork for what we currently have. And I mean, Dre, people don't realize how influential Dre probably really is, not just in his production of hip hop, but in the production of house music.
Yeah, really, really influential, man. And I remember having the jazz guys' reaction to that stuff. And by that, I mean, you know, jazz guys are just a really strange group. I had a wealthy friend of mine who was actually a billionaire when I met him, and he said, you know, I want to figure out some marketing strategies, and I'm to help you with your career, and I'm going to have to really get to know jazz people and the jazz audience. And you know, all aspects of the business. And he did a 3-month intensive study on it. And he came back to me and said, there's nothing I could do, man. Jazz people are just too strange. They're just, you know, you've got the straight ahead people that are snobby against all the smooth guys. And then you got a lot of the, even some of the smooth guys, very, you know, kind of verge on kind of glam look and stuff like that. Then they don't really play well, but their flowing hair sells, you know, 500,000 albums.
I know who you're talking about.
No, you don't.
Should I say any names while we're talking about this, or
these are fictional characters? Just, you know.
I don't know who you're talking about. Okay, continue.
Okay, but you know, it's just the jazzy side of me kind of went, oh man, this is just another distraction of the kind of jazz fusion that I was, you know.
Were you doing session work?
Yeah, I did a lot of session work.
Is that how you're making extra money on the side?
I did a lot of session work, and then when they started sampling these albums and then rapping over the top of it, I was upset about that.
Okay.
And one of the reasons I was upset about it is because there wasn't any consideration of melody or harmony or key center. So you would have a track that's playing, and then some guy is all angry and upset, and he's rapping over the top of it, it's grooving really hard, and then it would transition into something that would meld, and the songs wouldn't be in the same key at all. One is in C major, the other one is in F sharp minor, and the clash made me really nuts because I come from a jazz harmony head.
Oh, that's funny.
So it wasn't until many years later that one of my buddies, Preston Glass, who's a platinum R&B producer, he said, well, you know, Rob, it's really, that music was about a social movement. It was about something much bigger than the sound of the tracks and the movement. And I think like a lot
they didn't have the money to afford to actually get into studios and be as creative as a whole band could be sitting there for 5 hours or 6 hours a day creating songs, right?
Right.
You had to, like, you're one guy or two people sitting in a studio just trying to, like, okay, I'm going to just listen to, they'll spend 8 hours a day listening to songs to find something to sample. That was their whole job.
Right. Well, that's where it comes into the dad basement thing. And, the classic dad basement thing is, and I hope nobody like unsubscribes from my channel for telling this story, but it's the one in South Park where there's the guy named Token. That's the character in South Park. And the South Park kids are going to start a band, and they say, Token, go down into your dad's basement and get the Fender precision bass out. And he goes, we don't have a Fender precision bass. And then Cartman goes, trust me, there's one down in your dad's basement. Just go get it. And the dad's basement thing was where a lot of the LPs, like guys that were, on Soul Train and stuff like that. I had one of the guys that was a good friend of mine for many years was a Soul Train dancer. And he had a huge collection of all these LPs. So if you're a kid and, like kids do, you explore, you go around the house. Oh, look at this. We got a Barry White album. I wonder who Barry White was.
Right.
We've got a Bob James record. We've got.
Are you mad? Were you upset because those samples weren't being paid for, at least during those days? I mean, obviously, like Rick James, Super Freak, on Can't Touch This. Great example, right? He wasn't getting paid for quite a long time on that song. He finally got paid, but it just took a long time for him to get paid on that.
Well, Rick's whole story was one that I, followed from.
You know it better than I would, probably.
Well, his there's a new documentary out about him on Showtime, which is a really interesting watch. But the sampling thing was, to me, it was a limitation of the song form, because my music was never really vocal. It's instrumental music, and it was more about expressing a mood or falling in love with somebody or taking a trip to the mountains or going swimming or something like that, where people could put their own meaning and inflection in, because it wasn't lyrical, but it was very long form. It's
like taking Tchaikovsky's Nutcracker and then turning it into cracking like physical nuts on a dude.
Well, pretty much. I mean, it's just like taking.
It didn't have the same meaning from the original song, too.
So once they would sample, and trust me, I started chopping loops and using samplers and waveforms too. And when you're first trying to learn how to do it, it's not all that easy. It's a lot easier now with Logic, because it has beat detection, and it'll almost talk right out of the computer and say, this is 89.33 beats per minute. Would you like your loop to be 2, 4, 6, or 8 bars?
And by the way, in 10 years from now, what you're talking about is going to be completely gone, right? It's going to be something completely different at that point.
Yeah, I mean, it's all moving along really.
Logic will be gone. Yeah, good.
Yeah, well, the only reason I got into Logic is because all of the other DAWs and the softwares just became obsolete. So, I started out on one kind of software, and I used it until they went under, and then on the next one till they went under, they went under. But your current setup, it looked to me like you're using Serato. Is that what you use?
That's it. Yeah. That's
Okay,
it.
so
I'm using
tell people.
Serato and just a basic mixer and through a computer. That's all I'm doing.
So it's a 2 turntable setup.
At home it is, yeah. I used to have a couple CDJs. I have controllers, which is basically the 2 turntables and a mixer right in the middle. It's just a digital version of that.
Okay.
It's crazy to watch people that don't understand, like they're watching DJ, like, well, what's this thing, spinning on the side, or it's not spinning, but you see a light kind of going in a circle on the left, and then you see a light going on the right. And it's like, what's that? It's like, these are turntables. These are just digital versions of turntables.
Uh-huh.
And they can't quite comprehend that.
Well,
you know what I'm saying? Like, this is like, that's a mixer in the middle. It's one big complete unit, right? It's just a unit, and it's got all connected together. It's got the turntable, a mixer, and a turntable, or a CD player, mixer, CD player. But it's just all now combined into this one carryable unit. It's not like bringing a 30-pound turntable, a 10-pound mixer. Now you're bringing 5-pound controller.
Right.
That has all those functions.
I saw the picture. I saw the picture of one of your recent gigs on your website, and it's so compact. You could like backpack that thing almost.
Well, you and I can imagine what keyboards would have been like in the 70s, right? I mean, and 80s too, probably.
Even
90s is probably when it started.
all the way up to about 1994. I was collecting hardware synths from the invention of synths through Roland's big breakthroughs. And then in 94, I ended up, my studio, I had like 50 hardware synths.
Is the studio behind you your studio, by the way?
Yeah, it's on loan. I'm at to friends.
Okay. So at home now, you probably have one keyboard maybe that you practice with, or maybe 2 or 3, but not.
I have 2. I have a 4-octave plastic USB MIDI keyboard made by M Audio, and then I have a 88-note Casio digital piano.
Right.
So I have those 2 things, and actually, on most of the session work that I do, I don't even pull out the 88-note controller.
Isn't it crazy? See, this is what I mean. You're sitting in front of a picture of a studio, which technically you don't need any longer. That's the thing. It's like you say, you're borrowing it. Now you can borrow studios in a sense.
Well, you can rent, and you can own. And what I realized, and I guess 1998 or 9, around the time that I met you, I did a similar thing of the donation deal, because I had all of this gear, and the gear was starting to age, and I had to move. And I was moving from one place to another place, and I thought to myself, man, I do not want to carry all this crap around. I had a huge studio, and I was downsizing, and one of my friends said, who would love to have this gear is all of the local high schools and the colleges. These kids would love it. Yeah. Because, a Roland XB80, which was like the keyboard I used on all the early Hubert Laws stuff, those things were like $3,000, man.
Yeah, but it was paid for at that time, but it's hard to give up.
No, I just mean if you're 15 and you're going to Lawndale High School, how are you going to get a $3,000 XP80 when you're 15? Your life is complicated enough. So I just started calling band directors, and the people that took the most of my stuff was North Hollywood High, because I used to live down the street from them, and I would use that school as dog park. And that director said, okay, how big a truck do we need to send over there?
So how much stuff did you have?
I had a lot. I had like 40 or 50 hardware keyboards.
Wow. Yeah. I've got a couple of buddies who still have studios similar to what you had. And I remember going, well, this has got to be in the early 2000s, or maybe, somewhere around there, where I'd go into he built his own studio, and he probably had 20 keyboards in that studio, just on the wall. I'm like,
Yeah.
what are you using, man? He goes, well, this one right here in front of the console. Like, that's it. He just goes to the other ones for fun. That's all he would do.
Well, it's an interesting thing too, because in the studio session world, we have, different kinds of recording session descriptions and different kinds of clients. And what's always kind of made me laugh, since I've been in every type of studio environment, is that you think about, okay, well, most people are really visually oriented. They're more visual than they are audio oriented. So if they walk into a room and they can see that there's like a kitchen in there, and then there's fresh bagels out there and cream cheese and all kinds of fruit cups and 3 kinds of custom coffee that you could have, then you go down a hallway, and then as
the
you
big
go down
studio.
the hallway, there's gold and platinum records everywhere and everything, and you finally get to this door, and the door is a big red door, and you walk in there and it's a room like this one here. Then that's what I call the studio experience. Like clients that have that kind of money, the studio experience is still available. But what most people don't realize is that it kind of, like you said, it kind of doesn't really matter, because the magic of the music and how it's getting created is inside the person twisting the knobs. Pressing the keys down. So you don't have to have, I've had kids come in that were studying piano from me, and they'd say, look, Mr. Mullins, I just did this on my iPhone. And they would have like a 16-track thing on GarageBand with 8 tracks of vocals.
And it sounded pretty decent too, probably.
It would just be incredible.
Right.
Swipe. And they say, I can play it faster. I can play it backwards. I can flex time it. I can do it upside down. What do you want me to do? And I said, I want you to practice the piano.
That reminds me so much of my college days, because I had a teacher. We had to learn how to do editing on a reel-to-reel.
Right.
And I remember at the time my buddy, who I'm still friends with from college, he's now a video editor, and he was working at Power 106, 105.9 here in Los Angeles.
Oh yeah, huge.
And he goes, we have a digital board that we're trying to get rid of. Now, we were using analog boards back then. We're talking the late 80s, very early 90s. And they go, we have a digital board we're willing to sell to you for like 10 grand to the university, which was nothing. It was a $250,000 board. They were getting $1 million board put in at Power. So they're like, all right, we're just want to get rid of this. So we go to myself, my buddy, he tells me this. I go, hey, let's go put this digital board in. And the teacher's like, no, you got to learn how to do analog. Yeah, that's the future. Analog's, and we're like, what the? Can I cuss on this? Am I allowed to cuss on this? I really want to cuss. We're like, what the F are you talking about? Like, I'm doing digital shit at my own place at that point.
Right. Right.
Like, I'm already into CDs. I'm not playing vinyl.
Right.
I'm still playing vinyl, but I'm starting to move into the CD and the DAT and a whole different world at that point. And so just to hear like that teacher, because I hope you're not that teacher. I know we're having this conversation.
Well,
you're talking about, get on the keyboard.
There's always a place for the older ideas and for the newer ideas. But, when people ask me about the internet and music and the future and
electronic. Can you learn how to play? Can you play? Okay. Like, I don't play an instrument. So you would have to actually help me understand this and maybe help your people out there.
Yeah.
Do you really need to learn to play keyboard on a keyboard, or could you do it somewhere else? Is there, what's the future of that?
Well, you're catching us right around the time of the NAMM show where they debut all of the new controllers. And basically everything that is, being used by music creators is some type of a controller. Now, a piano keyboard is, for me, the best kind of controller because I grew up with that keyboard. But Novation company makes a thing that's just ridiculous, and it's just a whole bunch of colored dots.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And you know,
Like a square
Ableton,
with colors on
yeah,
it.
yeah,
So you
and
can almost
Ableton
sample
Live
it.
is
Yeah.
kind of like that. I mean, now Logic has a thing called live loops where you can, you know, I see kids with iPads just like pressing these little buttons, and it's amazing what all they can do to create these grooves. But there again, these are 4-bar grooves. These are 8-bar grooves. These are not jazzy songs with that kind of, you know, interesting harmonic stuff that I grew up with, like the key changes and the chords that are more basic, more advanced than 1 5 6 4 Roman numeral thing. These are, you know,
Can you be as creative as you were in a studio with like 3 or 4 other musicians? I'm just trying to think out loud as I'm talking to you, but you know, a guitar, piano, a drum person, like live,
right,
and do that maybe one of 2 ways: is have someone else in the studio with you on a controller,
right.
hashing out sounds, or does that make sense? You know,
Yeah.
like is that can you be as creative as the Doors were in their studio sessions, creating those kind of sounds on a kit on your phone, on your computer probably?
Well, I would have to say, you know, shout out to the Doors, and nobody will ever replicate the Doors or top them at their thing. But when it comes to the whole idea of automation versus human beings, which is really kind of what you're asking, I was one of the first in my world. I was one of the first people that I knew of that was doing everything alone, because I could play the drums. I could play keyboard bass because I watched Stevie Wonder and George Duke.
Yeah, Stevie Wonder was doing it, right? I mean, I know he played every instrument. And
Yeah,
we're talking
so I was like,
instruments. He was
man,
playing
if
every
Stevie
instrument.
Wonder can do all this and George Duke can do all this,
Prince.
I'm also a drummer, and then I'm just going to do that. So I got into, you know, 4-track was the first recorder I bought. Then I got an 8-track. Then I got a 16, and then it went to computers. But I found that, you know, I was always faster. Like I could get a good MIDI version or a good demo version of something done way faster without other people.
Yeah.
Because what happens when there are other people involved is that there's always the distraction of their humanness. And what I mean by that is not that they're not contributing musically or something like that, but the factor of their humanness. Like I was at a session, it was probably about 2 years ago. It was a very famous young drummer and great band. I mean, it was all A-list cats. And the studio is costing like $1,500, and every guy in the room, and there's 6 guys in the room, they're all making $500 for that 3-hour block. And where's the drummer? Oh, we don't know, man. Well, when's he supposed to show up? 3 hours ago. Did you call him? Yeah, we called him. So finally, the guy shows up, and everybody's getting so testy. And you can only tell jokes for a certain amount of time until people start to get really pissed off, because, you know, everybody's got to go. And the guy shows up, and he comes into the room, and he doesn't even apologize, but his phone rings, and he's goes right to his telephone.
He walks right out the door. Yeah.
And he walks right out the door, and then you hear him throwing the phone into the toilet, into the studio bathroom. And then he walks out of the house shouting. So the issue of the humanness is what I'm talking about, because, you know, if I'm in a workshop and people say, do you like to create on your own better? Do you like to create? I like to write my songs by myself most of the time, and then I'll do a chart and a recorded outline, and then I'll take them to these great players, and then they'll just like play it amazing, way beyond.
I think you're gonna like the Beatles docu, because there's a part in there where we're watching them creating music.
Right.
So they would do it individually, and then they would all come together, right? So they would individually, like George or Paul would write their songs, or Ringo or whoever was creating songs, they would do it outside of the studio. Right. They come back, and then they'd have these songs, and then sometimes they'd be in studio and riffing, and then suddenly they would create a song. But what was scary about it for me, as someone who really loves the Beatles, is when they would just be riffing and doing something, and then here's the song. Like if they would just create it out of thin air so quickly, like within a minute they would have a hit song.
Well,
And
it's a channeling. It's a channeling from what I call the channeling from outer space. It's kind of like when DJ Crash came to Earth from the asteroid mother planet of Crash.
yeah,
You came here and bam, now you're you, right? Because it's I think for anyone that writes music, there's always a positive and a negative to collaboration, and the Beatles were the greatest collaborators of all time. I think all of those albums that they did were made in a period of about like 5 years or something. And how many was it?
Or even 7, we'll say 7 or 8.
7 or 8 albums in 5 years. That's insane.
Yeah. But they had already pre-written a lot of those songs. I got a chance to meet with one of the Lewinson, I think is his name, is one of the authors of the Beatles biographies. And he sat there for an hour and talked about Beatles and got to hear that story. And they had, I'm not gonna. This isn't a Beatles show, obviously, but
okay.
But yeah. But it was interesting because I didn't realize, you would think because they only had that 10-year period where they had their first album to the very last album or whatever. You thought that was it. They got together a couple of years before that, and then they ended almost as quickly. But no, they had been together for at least 10 years prior to all of that before they got hits. So people don't realize that those guys had to work their way. They were a cover band, for the first 10 years of their life.
They were doing Elvis Presley covers.
Exactly, Little Richard covers. Anything that anything they felt was kind of cool back then. So I'm a cover band. That's what I am. I'm not denying that, but I'm a good cover band. Like I take other people's music and I am able to create a different energy as a DJ. And I think same with you, because sometimes you play other people's music. I'm sure you're doing a live set somewhere and you may play 20 songs total and maybe you got 2 in there that might be a cover of somebody.
Yeah, there's really good music out there that's been composed. And I think you and I are fortunate to live in what I would call the golden age of recordings. I mean, because music from the 1950s to now, this like 80-year period or 90 years coming up period is the most amazing period in music to me. Maybe it's every generation is different, but I don't remember there being as much horrible music as there has been lately, because everyone can make horrible music now. I'm just saying, everyone can make music, so it can be really great and it'll be really horrible all at the same time. Well, yeah, I mean that's one of those things whenever you mass market things to people in order to get them to make monetary purchases, there's always sacrifice. So one of those, and I was having this conversation with a student of mine who's a fantastic improviser a couple of weeks ago, and she was playing this like ridiculous stuff. It was amazing, and I said, well, what's it like when you play that into the computer? And she says, the computer can't understand it at all. It's just a mess. And you pull up the notes, and it's just a complete disaster. So, a computer company like Apple, when the marketing guys say that first they use that word simply, and then simply just play these 4 kick drums on these 4 beats, and we'll help you.
But you're describing jazz music, right?
No,
when you're jazz riffing and coming up with this really
let me finish. No, let me finish.
Oh, sorry.
I'm describing disco. So the computer companies marketing people say, well, if we can make this easy enough that everybody knows what it is and they can all follow it, then we can say that our software, as long as the melodies aren't complicated, our software will make you sheet music for anything that you can come up with.
That's true.
And it really stops at Mary Had a Little Lamb, Crash, because you go beyond to Mary Had a Little Lamb and the computer is not going to do it right. I mean, I've got the most sophisticated Logic Pro version, and it can't tell when I'm playing something with the left hand or something with the right. It doesn't know where the clef sign is supposed to be between the treble clef and the bass clef. You have to go in and draw things and edit, and it takes forever. And some programs.
Do you think that technology will be about maybe in 10 years? Do you think the computer will be sophisticated enough that maybe you can record something into a computer and then it will eventually extrapolate those signs, those notes?
Oh yeah, it does it now. It just doesn't do it well. So
Okay.
as long as it's like early BTS, then the computer's got a shot,
Mhm.
But if it's Paul Desmond or Miles Davis or Herbie Hancock or me, the computer does not have a chance.
I'm glad you put yourself right up there with Miles and Herbie.
Well, somebody's got to carry it on, right? Somebody's got
You're
to
better
carry it
than
on.
those guys. Come on, man.
People ask me about my discography and, why does this sound like this? And why does this sound a little like Weather Report? This sounds a little like Herbie. This sounds a little bit like Miles. And I say, well, all of these people have influenced me. So, of course, some of my music is going to sound like it's got influences of these people because my 40 album discography is the journey of jazz, fusion, and beyond.
Yeah.
It's from straight ahead jazz into, fusion and funk and reggae and punk jazz like Jaco Pastorius did, all the way into the smooth jazz thing and whatever is going to come next, along with a few dance tracks. So it's an exciting time to have all these tools, and it's great because I can do what you can do. I can put this laptop in a bag, and I go back to Denver to see my dad pretty often. I keep one of these little plastic keyboards out there, and I have a set of headphones out there, and it's just me and a laptop and 2 pairs of pants and a couple pairs of socks, and I'm gone.
Last time you called me from there, you weren't wearing any pants at all.
No, that's pants are optional, but not this time of year.
It is pretty bad right now weather-wise, isn't it? I mean, at least in the Midwest, Northeast, etc. So,
have you been called? I mean, it's your email is says USA on there. Do you get called to travel to foreign countries very much?
Not well, obviously in the last couple of years, no. But I used to get called to go places like Canada or Mexico, places like that. But it's I hopefully it will pop back up again business wise, over the next few years. And hopefully they want someone with a cutting edge or different kind of a vibe than what you typically hear. A lot of people are in the DJ business. I consider to be kind of cookie cutter in their style. So you could go to one club and hear kind of similar vibe at the next club, at the next club.
Right.
Yeah.
That's not
maybe that. I don't know. I don't know if you feel that way in live music or not, but I mean, it's very easy to be a cookie cutter DJ. I think because you want to emulate that DJ, so you're playing that Tupac song and that Biggie song and that Calvin Harris track, and then the next. Disco house track next to that one.
Right.
So it's really easy to just take your phone and then just hit every song and just copy someone's playlist, basically.
Well, that's what's kind of, sets people into the different categories of professional and, amateur.
I don't know. I think that line is blurred, especially in my business. I think that's a blurred line.
Oh, really?
Again, I can't say that about yours because there is a level. I don't know how to play a piano. I don't know how to play keyboards. I don't know how to play guitar. So those numbers of people who are gifted like that are much fewer, or have the opportunity to be able to do live things like that, as opposed to someone like me who could have a computer and buy a controller and just download some music, and suddenly I'm a DJ. Not saying you're going to be a great DJ, but you can be a DJ.
Yeah, what I wanted to ask you about this thing coming into the creative process, which is really what we're talking about now, is your orientation, like, because everybody's got different orientations. So is yours really focused around BPM a lot? Or is it focused around the artist? Like, this artist goes with it. I mean, I know some kids that have come into my school are like, well, this person has the same hair as that person that wears the type of Apple Watch that I want to buy. So that's
right.
That's good.
Yeah, that's a great question. Only somebody I think who understands really music would understand that. You know, when you walk into a bar or a club, I'm going to go back to your question, but someone who walks into a bar or a club, you're going to stand there and you're going to listen and you're going to try to understand, hey, what's the direction this person's going, right? What are they trying to what are they trying to energy wise trying to do? I think that goes with the live band as well, right? When China Club was playing, for example, we have to use that as our example. You guys were mainly funk, soul, a little bit of disco, and a little bit of rock. I mean, that was, but you leaned on the funk side, you know, and less on the rock side. Occasionally when the rock star came in, you played your rock music, but even the rock people were playing funk.
Right.
They were playing funk and soul. I mean, that's what it was, you know, it could be. And so for me, you know, when I'm playing, is it by BPM or is it by genre? Maybe a little bit of both. And it's weird because I try to explain to people that sometimes I'm trying to teach music to people. I know it's weird to say that.
Good luck.
It's weird to say that as a DJ, but I'm really, in a sense, trying to teach people, like, you know what? I can play this house track next to this hip hop song, and people go like, did he just fucking do that? Did he really just do that? You know, sometimes it's confused myself, and sometimes it confused the audience, and sometimes it's just to create something completely new and different.
Right.
And you know, who did that were, if people want to look this up, the Too Many DJs were really smart at creating this mashup sound. I'm not a mashup DJ necessarily. I do like going from a genre and building an energy, and then going into a new genre of music, and then creating a different energy, and then breaking it down into another genre. You know, so I might be doing 3 or 4 songs of disco, 3 or 4 songs of house music, 3 or 4 songs of hip hop, and just kind of mixing it up in a weird way. You know, it might be I might take an 80s electro track. We were talking about Dr. Dre, and I might mix that against the current house song, because they are so similar in their vibe, but they're have their different periods of time that they come from.
Right.
So it's like I'm playing this current Calvin Harris or Skrillex track, and then I'm going to take this old late 80s hip hop song or an old 80s electro song, and I'm going to mix them together.
Let's just stop right there for a minute. Explain to people, what does an electro song do? What's that?
Well, electro is, if we're talking BPM, you're usually talking somewhere between like 122 to 130 BPM. So it's a high energy song. It's something that you would have to think of in terms of like current house music, maybe even something higher energy than even what you would consider like loungy house music. So to people that understand what house music is, there are different genres of house. There's techno, and there is electro house, and then there's disco house, and I mean, there's all kinds of subgenres in the house music.
And then there was, you know, Full House.
Yeah, and then there was Full House with Bob Saget. Yeah.
I guess the house isn't quite as full now that Bob is gone.
Yeah, I didn't know Bob too well, but I really did appreciate him. Anyway, so that's what electro was back in the 80s. Electro was planet rock, play at your own risk. It was usually a higher energy. Kraftwerk actually inspired planet rock. So if you look at Kraftwerk, you really, the 70s music inspired the 80s electro sound. And it then inspired house music from, you know, that period of time. Then you have artists like Manuel Gottschling, who was with who was a guitarist for a 70s rock band. Forgot the name of it, House of something, Ashra maybe, Ashra. So he created, this 60-minute song of just guitar riffing, which then actually led itself into house music. It's crazy. I mean, all these things kind of lead into other things. Hip hop was created by jazz music in a sense, because you're sampling jazz and you're sampling funk,
Well, the feel of straight ahead jazz and the basic swing beat is another one of those things where it's a double time idea to the kick and snare. And so, for those of us that are drum programmers, I've been a drum programmer and a beats guy since they invented the drum machine. I was one of the first guys to go out and get a drum machine and just go, man, this is so freaking cool. I love it.
Yeah.
The
808.
Speaking about briefcases, we used to have huge briefcases of floppy disks to load up the samples.
The big ones, the big floppy discs. Not the small.
Not the 5.5s, but the three.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I remember those. Gosh,
yeah, we'd carry around. Everybody would be like, the drug dealers would have, 20 grand in there to buy Coke or whatever, and then nerdy guys like me, we'd show up with our cool briefcase and open it up, and it's all floppy disks.
It's 20 grand worth of floppy disks.
It was, and so it's interesting for me as I see all of these new names, these new names of genres coming up, because one of the things that's most annoying to me right now, but I totally understand it, is trap. And I'm not annoyed by the fact that it's another down tempo halftime kind of thing. What I'm annoyed about is the sound of the hi-hat. Like, to me, it's kind of like, BBs being shot out of a microwave or something. It's so tick, 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 tick.
Okay, yeah.
And all it is that somebody figured out what is a 64th note. The little kid in me goes, well, 50 years ago, I knew what a 64th note is. I wonder why it took. Drum machines have been around since 1980. Why did it take this long for everyone else to figure that out?
You're just becoming an old curmudgeoning man, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Get off my lawn, you little rubber-stabbers.
I'd have to say, it was interesting to see how they are using note repeat to do that now. But every generation has its foundation and stuff that went before it. And the people that, assimilate all of those things, like, I was assimilating and ingesting jazz music from an early age because of my mom being a big band person. And then all this technology hit over my lifetime, and you were doing your garage parties and stuff. And you went all the way from these garage parties to, celebrity and corporate events include Mariah Carey, George Clooney, Matt Damon, Herbie, Mick, Jagger, Beyonce, Snoop Dogg. I mean, do you ever get bored with this, or is it still exciting for you?
The clubs are slightly more exciting. The corporate stuff can be fun. It just depends on the age of the crowd and how far I can kind of take it musically. But usually it's the kind of, I got to play to the crowd, in those situations. In the same way, that's why Barfly or whatever clubs I happen to be in, sometimes I can mess around. It just depends. That's the beauty of what Barfly was. If you look back at it, it was small enough and big enough that we could mess around with the crowd. It wasn't so big that you had to play a certain style of music so they had 2,000 people happy. Right. You didn't have to make 2,000 people happy there. You only had to make 150 happy, and the other 150 standing at the bar just drink and talk and have their own good time until you find a song that they like, So that's why I love smaller venues as opposed to big venues.
Right.
I'm not saying that big venues, if I was a huge famous person, but then you have to play your own music at those big venues, right? So if you're Billie Eilish, you're singing the same song every single time you're going out there.
Right.
At a small venue, if I were Billie Eilish, I would be singing everything that I never sing on the road. Does that
Right.
make sense?
Absolutely, man. Well, what about the stories of, because I always hear these stories, and the college students, when I was teaching electronic music, they'd say, well, is it really true that David Guetta doesn't really do any of his songs and he just
Right.
pays these young guys to do all of these programming, and then they stick it on his laptop and he hits play and he makes all the money and there's 100,000 people? Is that true? And
In a sense, it is. Some of these guys I know, like Tiesto, and I'm not trying to rag on these guys. I think it's absolutely fine if they want to be the Milli Vanilli in a sense of that. And I'm totally cool. I want to be a Milli Vanilli. I'll be honest. I want someone to send me a track and go, hey, is there a way you can push this? And if I can put my name on it and make half the money, I'll take it. I'm totally fine with that. So that, yeah,
it just
this goes back to the sampling.
It just became such a huge business in the last 10 or 12 years with EDM and Calvin Harris and these guys and Skrillex.
Calvin makes his own music. I know that. I think he has his own studio. So I think he's one of those guys that actually is creative.
Oh, very much. Very.
And I remember he had songs from 15 years ago that he had created, like hip hop tracks, which I actually like some of those old songs that he did too.
I love that early stuff of his, man. I became a huge fan of his just by watching some of his live sets where it was just not really the big stadium kind of stuff, but he's just around with like 20 or 30 people backstage. He says, hey man, check this out. I'm gonna blow your mind. And then he would drop in these dubstep snares and these bass drops. And I had never heard anything like that before. And I was like, well, the curmudgeon Mullins says, all right, somebody discovered halftime. But
there you are again.
There I am again, man. The old guy, one haircut away from the rest home. But
I gave up a long time ago on caring. Honestly, on caring about whether someone not steals, because that's a hard word to use. Takes another person's sample, or or they don't create that music themselves. If they didn't write the song themselves, that era is done. I'm not mad at Milli Vanilli, by the way. I don't know if you remember, but Yanni, not Yanni, but one of the two guys used to come into the China Club all the time. He never sang; he would just hang at the bar. One of the two Milli Vanilli guys.
Well, you're right. He never sang. You're totally right that he never sang.
That would be interesting. That would have been interesting that he got up on stage, but he was, he was trying to sing at that point. But they deserve the Grammy. I actually believe they deserved it, not because they put on the front, but because the music was actually real. You know what I mean? Yes, that. Maybe they personally didn't deserve it, but maybe the guy that wrote the song deserved it because it was good music.
Yeah, I think the producer probably deserved it, but that just kind of goes into the, all of the kind of weird things that happen with, artists and branding and record companies and, dark corners of alleys and things like that. Or, because everybody knows those stories of like Ashley Simpson on Saturday Night Live when her track doesn't work, and Mariah when her track doesn't work. And that used to be a big business. I mean, I knew a guy that all his job was for years was just to keep all of Madonna's background vocals playing on the shows. And that was, during the 80s. And she had all of these vocals were all pre-recorded. And his gig was, and the gear wasn't that good then either. I mean, you were really taking a chance. You had to really have it together. And then, what's funny about the Milli Vanilli thing to me, though, is that you just, you come away from that a year after they got exposed or whatever, and then you're 28 and you had a Grammy. Now you don't have a Grammy. Now you have to live 50 years in disgrace. Like you walk down the street and they go, oh, there's a guy.
Yeah.
What a bummer.
It's horrible. Yeah.
That would be nuts, man. Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on my show.
We're done?
We've been doing this for 90 minutes already. And And
It did go by pretty quick, actually. I mean, we didn't even talk about like how the past and the future of music is going to be.
Well,
think about that.
We're going to do that in a future episode. I'll have you back in season 3. And I'm actually on this computer. I'm more concerned about the hard drive space and being able to save the recording, which is one because I know this one's.
I love technology. Okay.
It doesn't have that much left on the drive. So, but here's the thing, man. But number one, I want to just thank you and say I love you for 24 years of great friendship and association.
Yeah, you too.
And number two, the fact that, you're a hustler, you're an innovator, you're still doing it. I'm super proud of you, buddy.
You too, man. I mean, both of us, we have to be hustlers. It
We're
sucks,
survivors.
but we do.
We're survivors.
Yeah.
It's been nice to an audience out there, in times after we were doing these gigs together. Crash would just call me up after we didn't talk for 8 months or 12, and he'd just call and he'd say, "Hey, Mullins, it's Crash." And I'd be like, "Hey, cool." And he says, "Are you all right? Is everything going cool? What's up? What are you doing?" And I really appreciate that kind of friendship from, a Hollywood guy, because it's really hard to make good friends in LA. That's true.
Yeah. Thanks, man. It's been fun. It's been a good ride. I mean, we really are lucky. Let's just be honest. Maybe luck. We're just at the right place at the right time for certain things, but we are lucky. Let's just fill it into that bucket to be able to perform and do what we love and make a living and be able to survive and
well,
pay our bills or whatever.
The turning point for me was I was on the top of the building at 8530 Sunset on Break It, a Barfly gig, and I had a chance to marry that girl Kelly, and I didn't marry her, and I am crediting that decision with all the great future that I've had.
Okay. I'll take it.
She was so beautiful, and I would be dead if I had spent like one more week with her.
Okay.
All right, Crash. I love you, bro.
Love you guys. Yeah,
Thanks
love you.
for coming on. Take care. And that's going to do it for another episode of the Planet Mullins podcast. Don't forget, you can sponsor a show. You can find Crash on his website, djcrashusa.com, if you want to book him. My website is planetmullins.com. The show is at youtube.com/planetmullins. Over and out. Thank you. And we'll see you on the next one.